Alright you guys, and welcome back to your brand new sculpting video. And since apparently there's an ongoing competition on which YouTuber can create the most shark related sculptures, I figured I want to be part of that competition, which is why this week we are going to be entering the deepest depths of the deepest ocean in order to create a shark abomination that is yet to be found. And although this one starts out as a normal shark, it will soon turn into a lab experiment gone wrong. So after I slapped on a decent amount of clay on the aluminum interior, I can poke in some eyes and nostrils, and then get back to the mouth. And since apparently the shark just couldn't stop yapping while being at the lab, our mad scientist stitched his mouth together. Anyways, after his mouth has been closed permanently, I can start adding some wrinkles and folds around the strings, before making two balls of an oddly familiar size, which will work as his eyes. With his eyes in place, I'll go back to the back and add some more back to the back, as well as an elongated fold covering his throat. With that in place, I can add his two fins, but I made sure to make them pretty underdeveloped since he won't be using them no longer. And for the sake of completeness, I added his gills. And now we'll start to see the first signs of the shark being modified, since the poor baby has lost his back fin in order to give the sculpture a bit more of a dramatic effect. And the deep cut on his back will once again get stitched together, using the same trademark strings as for the mouth. I can then get started working on the tail, if that's what you call it. Well, prove my inability to sculpt by not being able to draw a straight line. But as I've learned from experience, you're better off ignoring your flaws and just keep rocking at it, baby. Anyways, with my mental insanity gradually revealing itself, and me honestly not trying to hide it any longer, I can put some thick laces into my pre-made holes, connecting the artificial tail to the shark. I can then grab my balls and make use of them in front of the camera. I was meant to say ball stylist here, but that's what I said, right? Anyways, with the tail being tailored, I can get started working on his belly. But since a normal flat stomach would look kinda boring, I figured I'ma sew on a set of abs. Set abs should of course be pretty lean. With my abs being shredded enough, I can start fiddling around with the aluminium foil, where I'll end up with two pointy wieners which can get covered in some clay. And since those two wieners will be representing his arms, I'ma start by carving out some muscular definition, onto which I can then add his big bean-shaped biceps. Once they're blended in, I can carve out a big tricep, as well as some more muscular development on the forearm. I'll then repeat the whole process one more time till I'm left with one similar looking second arm. I'll leave my two arms handless, not because I'm lazy of course, I don't want anybody to think that, but more for artistic freedom. Now I did already get started working on his first leg, where I'll carve out a similar amount of muscle, but this time for the legs, finishing them off by blending in the proof that he's got some insane calf development. And again, by repeating this process, I'll end up with two legs which can now get pressed into his body, connecting them with some more of those reoccurring worms of clay. I can then map out where his arms are going. And after poking in a supporting wire, I made sure my arms won't fall off and I connected them to the body. And while adding the final details, my studio lamp decided to close shift early that day, and I'm not even close to being a professional, so you'll have to watch me add the last string in complete darkness. Luckily that was the last sculpting step anyway. I tossed my shark boy into the oven where he came out of with the unpleasant surprise of a crack on his forehead, but since I have no real choice here, I'ma paint him regardless. And after taking way too long to get his upper skin color right, I'll paint his belly white, where I'll once again end up not being satisfied with the final result. So I'll go over the whole thing again, but this time with a more bone white color. And although I do believe that shark bellies do tend to be a bit brighter, I'm definitely more satisfied with this look. I'll then go ahead and blend in the transition between his upper and lower half. And apparently my left hand sees a lot more fun in dropping the sculpture than holding it. which is why I'm now left with a separate arm to paint, which I'll set aside for now and get started painting the shark's eyes, as well as the gills and all his folds on his body, using a nice dark bluish grey wash. The nostrils will receive the same treatment. I can then grab myself a sponge to add some final highlights. And this sponge is still dirty from the fat SpongeBob I made, which just shows that I don't give a shit about cleaning my equipment. Don't be like me. I'll then slam some color on the table, which I'll be using to paint his arms and legs, making sure they get a nice coverage, since I don't want the gray clay, to be shining through after painting. And after covering his tail and abs in the same color, I can glue the broken arm back on, making sure it will stay there. And then it's just a matter of painting the dozens of strings and laces which I've scattered all over his body. I'll then mix up another wash, which I'll use to add some depth on the muscles of his arms and legs. I'll then have to commit second-degree murder by beheading our good old spongy friend, since I needed a smaller sponge in order to reach all the spots at which my limbs are angled. And now it's on to the fun part, being covering the whole sculpture in a hell lot of blood, and I happen to have the perfect color for this, being named dry blood. So I'll get a truckload of this onto my brush and get started. And I get that me arguably being most excited about covering the whole animal in copious amounts of blood might seem a little weird, and maybe even creepy, but I'm completely sane. Trust me. No, but for real, I think I've lost my mind quite a long time ago, so this is not of the ordinary. In all seriousness though, I really like the dried blood effect you can create with this paint. Whoa, what's that? Guess the arm broke off again, but at this point I don't even care anymore. I added some more blood to the tips of his arms, since he must have gotten into some fights after escaping the lab. And after gluing on the arm a second time, my shark mutant is done. Alright, thank you guys for watching. I have to say I had a lot of fun creating my first animal mutant character. And since there are quite a lot of other animals out there the mad scientist and I would love to get our hands on, let me know down below which animal you want to see me disfigure next. And I also want to mention that I now got a Patreon page where you can get to see some behind the scenes and possible early access to my videos. And with all that being said, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one. And I love y'all. Bye.